día de hoy nos toca visitar el centro de la ciudad de Riverside. Es la ciudad donde yo vivo, la ciudad donde radicamos mi familia y yo. Estamos aquí en el sur de California. Estamos listos para tomar el desayuno antes de entrar a este maravilloso lugar que es el Mission Inn, que es un landmark aquí en California. Ahorita vamos a entrar con un tour pagado para conocerlo por dentro, su historia, sus lugares más enigmáticos y, ¿por qué no?, una que otra sorpresa. Por fuera es espectacular, ¿eh?
And most for right now, it's just used for storage.
Yeah.
The building is actually gorgeous on the inside.
It is.
Gorgeous windows, stained glass in there, but no, it is not safe. And so there's been lots of thoughts about what they wanted to do with it, but I've never heard of anything. I mean, they haven't made any decisions about it. If you guys just want to pull up around the model so everybody can see. Well, welcome to the Mission Inn. My name is Ruth Ann. I will be your docent today. I am a volunteer with Mission Inn Foundation. My partner in crime is Patty. Patty, you have to be nice to Patty because she has the keys to the rooms we're going to be getting into today. She does take bribes to get us into the rooms. It is an hour and 15 walking tour. You all look like you're stair friendly. I'm not going to worry about that. If you would please silence your cell phone or put them on bed in to just kind of set the scene. So after the Civil War, 1865, the movement is toward the west. Oregon, Nevada, Utah. Land was inexpensive, cheap, dirt cheap, but I think a lot of people wanted to get away from the horrors of the Civil War too. So there was a real movement out here to inland Southern California. There was a group of about 100 colonists. They were from the Midwest, educated, artistic. They wanted a new start. They wanted to establish a community very utopian, actually, in characteristics. Very, very conservative, very educated, very artistic, and there was 100 of them. You had to invest in this group to come out. They were originally going to settle in LA, but LA was too expensive, nothing has changed. So they came inland to inland Southern California. They found the land. Land was very cheap, so they decided this is where they were going to settle. Okay, they're from the Midwest. Very lush, growing area. You come to inland Southern California, we are desert. By every stretch of the imagination, we are desert. What are they going to grow in order to thrive and put food on their tables? They decided that they would have a silk industry, and so they planted mulberry trees. All the mulberry trees died, so they're back to square one. There were two people in that group. One was a woman by the name of Eliza Tibbets. Eliza Tibbets and her partner Luther had a relationship with a gentleman at the U.S. Department of Commerce, which is our U.S. Department of Agriculture now. The U.S. Department of Commerce was doing research on different plants and where they would thrive. All around the country, they were doing all this research. So they had gotten their hands on the seedless navel oranges. And Eliza Tibbets got her hands on two of them. She brought them out, she planted them on her property here in Riverside, and she watered them with her gray water. That was her dirty dishwater, her dirty laundry water. The orange trees loved it. They thrived with all that dirty water. Calicula, you got your cash crop. At one point, we had 20,000 acres of orange groves here in Riverside. The city wasn't founded until 1874, and that's also when the Miller family came out. So in 1895, 20 years after the city was founded, Riverside had the highest per capita income of any city in the United States. So we're talking Chicago, New York, San Diego, San Francisco. We were small, but we were mighty. The navel oranges are very special in that they are seedless. You have to propagate them by grafting. You can't just plant seeds. Different from the Valencia oranges, which are your drinking oranges. The navel oranges also have a very thick skin and a very, very sweet fruit. The thick skin allows for easy peeling and eating the fruit, but it also allows for protecting the fruit when you ship it across country and around the world. So when refrigeration was developed in the 1880s, Riverside packers could pack crates and crates and trainloads of these oranges to send across the country and around the world. And the Christmas tradition of putting the orange in the stocking, most of those oranges were probably from inland Southern California. They are different from the Valencia, and your Valencia are the drinking oranges. And so that is a little cocktail chatter, so you can tell the difference between the Valencia and the navel oranges. So the orange industry just absolutely thrived. But we are a city by the Riverside. The Santa Ana River was a free-flowing river at that time. But how do you get the water from the river up to those orange groves? You need canals. What do you do? How do you get canals? You need civil architects, engineers to build those canals. Christopher Columbus Miller, Frank Miller's dad, was a captain in the Union Army during the Civil War. He went back to Tama, Wisconsin after the war, but he needed a job. He was attracted to Riverside by the state and county government to come out here as a civil engineer, build canals for the thriving orange industry. So he comes out and he has a family, his wife Mary Ann, and then 4 children. The oldest son is Frank Augustus Miller, and that's how Frank Miller ends up in Riverside. But because Christopher Columbus Miller, Season, was brought here by the county, he got his pick of any parcel of land to build his house. So what does he do is he picks downtown Riverside, an entire city block that he buys for $250. $250, that is my footprint of my Mission Inn. That is the original footprint. That is the city block that he bought, and that's what it will always be. The annex that we talked about, the building over on 6th Street, the one that is the brick facade, that was built at a later time, but it is also part of that original footprint. So we're going to go in now and we're going to go through the paseo. As we go through the paseo, I want you to take nice deep breaths because we're on the exterior wall of Kelly's Spa. It is a world-class spa. It is a wonderful spa, and you're going to get the eucalyptus and sage
We smelled it.
Oh, it smells heavenly. So that is my spa treatment. Now with me, on the exterior wall, it doesn't cost you anything, but if you do go into Kelly's Spa, it's going to cost you a lot. Lovely spa. So we walk through, we cannot stop there because that's a very busy thoroughfare. We're going to walk by the swimming pool. The swimming pool was put in about 1948, but what they did is the home that Frank's family, Christopher Columbus Miller, built when they came out here in 1874 was a boarding house, so that was torn down for the swimming pool to go in. So I'll point that out too, and then we're going to end up at the statue of Frank Miller. So, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What is the equivalent today of the $250?
I don't know that equivalency, but when Frank built the first wing of the hotel, which is the Mission Wing, it cost him $250,000, 7.2 in today's dollars. So it gives you kind of a feel for what 2022 dollars are. These are true Garrison cannons. They're Spanish cannons. 1799, 1814. They were made in Spain. The copper is from Peru and Mexico. They were shipped to the Philippines. The Philippines were a territory of Spain. So they were shipped to the Philippines, and they guarded the garrison at Subic Bay in Manila. When the Panama Canal was being finished, 1914, 1915, they had 2 big expositions, kind of like world fairs. One was in San Diego in Balboa Park, and the second one was in San Francisco in Golden Gate Park. But they invited all the countries from around the world who were going to benefit from the Panama Canal, and they brought furniture and artwork. Well, the Philippines ended up bringing up these 2 Garrison cannons up to San Francisco for the exposition up there. After the exposition ended, what was happening but World War I? And people were in a hurry to get home. The Philippines did not want to ship these monstrous cannons back home. The other fun thing about Frank, he was the original garage sale guru. He never passed a sale he didn't want to buy something. Every place he went, he bought stuff. Now, whether he had a place for it here at the end, if it appealed to him, he bought it. So he ended up buying these 2 cannons and bringing them home to San Francisco. At that same time, there was a Mexican revolutionary by the name of Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa was from Chihuahua, Mexico. His issue was with his own government, not the United States government. But how do you fund a revolution? You need money. So Pancho Villa would raid the trains as they were coming north through northern Mexico into the United States. So we were very rural at that time, 1914, 1915, small, sleepy little Riverside. So Frank wanted to reassure all of his guests that should that nasty Pancho Villa come across the U.S. border, that he had 2 huge Garrison cannons to protect him. So he literally took the cannons and faced them out to Mission Inn Boulevard. He also had 2 Gatling machine guns that he put on the roof of the Mission Inn so that you, the guest, would be completely reassured, should Pancho Villa come across into Riverside, that you were protected by the cannons. Pancho Villa never came across the border in Southern California. He did raid the border, but not in California. They were never in danger at all. But it was a wonderful, dramatic story that Frank could tell his guests. Now, my cannons were never fired here on the property, but there was a gang of wild, crazy teenage boys, and they put fireworks in the barrels of the cannons, and they shot the fireworks off, and it blew out the windows of businesses across the street. So yes, my cannons have been fired, but not with cannonballs, only with fireworks by crazy boys. Before we move on, I do want to point out the 3 plaques that are kind of being overgrown by the vines. The first one here is from the city of Riverside. The large one in the middle is the state of California. And the one right here is probably the most important. In 1977, the Mission Inn was declared a National Historic Landmark by the United States government. One of the rules about being a National Historic Landmark, you may not change the exterior of the building. It always has to look like when it was approved. You can replace and repair, but you may not change it. The other hotel in Southern California that is a National Historic Landmark is the Hotel Del in San Diego. So the Hotel Del will never change either. It will always look like the Hotel Del. And the Mission is the only other one in Southern California. So we're going to go down and we're going to stop on the left-hand side. We're going to stop at the largest bell in the collection, but we're going to walk underneath the campanario. The campanario simply means bell tower. No, we did not steal the design from Taco Bell. Taco Bell stole the design actually from a true mission, a California mission in San Gabriel, California. So then we took the design from the San Gabriel mission, which was a true working mission. In fact, it's a working mission today. We're going to walk by the bust of Booker T. Washington that was dedicated by his. This is the Nanjing bell. It is a Chinese temple bell from a destroyed temple. It is not rung by a clapper. It is rung by a gong. It was bought by Frank's daughter, Alice, and her husband, Allison D. Wynn Hutchings, as a gift for her dad, Frank Miller. They found it, they brought it back. It was a prized possession of Frank. There was a gentleman staying here at the hotel when it was being displayed, a man by the name of Louis Comfort Tiffany. The ladies in the audience, of course, recognize Tiffany and the jewelry, seafoam green boxes, white ribbon. That was the dad. The jeweler was the dad. The son, Louis Comfort Tiffany, was the stained glass artisan. In fact, patented a type of stained glass called Favreau glass. Very, very famous, very, very wealthy, very spoiled and overindulged in. In fact, when he ate dinner in the dining room, he would have staff put a screen around him so that they couldn't see him eat. He took a fancy to Frank's bell. He wanted the bell. I'm a Tiffany, I can afford anything I want. You just name your price and I'll buy the bell from you. Frank says, no, it was a gift from my daughter, you can't have it. Mr. Tiffany became very, very upset, infuriated with Mr. Miller for not selling him what he wanted, swore that if he didn't sell him the bell, he would never come back to Riverside in the Mission Inn, and he would also tell his very well-heeled friends never come back to Riverside. We do know that Mr. Tiffany never did come back to Riverside, but whether he trash-talked us to his friends, we're not exactly sure about that. But the story and the relationship between Frank Miller and Mr. Tiffany does not end, and we're going to hear more about that later. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the inn by the check-in desk to the right, and we're going to end up at the Presidential Lounge. Your first clue is there are 11 U.S. presidents on the wall. So let's go ahead and go in. This lounge is a bar. It wasn't a bar when it was built. It was actually the largest hotel room, guest room in the hotel when it was finished, first wing of the hotel. It was called the Presidential Suite, and it was the Presidential Suite is because this is the rooms, the suite that Theodore Roosevelt stayed when he visited the Mission Inn in 1903 when he stayed here. So the bottom floor of the lounge was the salon area, and then there were stairs that went up to the sleeping area. So the rule about having your picture as U.S. President on my wall is you have to have some kind of relationship with the Mission Inn. You either had to stay here, have spoken here, been a guest here. So the first one, which is very interesting, that is Benjamin Harrison. He was president between 1890 and 1894. The Mission Inn, if you remember, was not finished until 1903. So you're thinking, why was a president whose picture's on the wall get a place of honor when the Mission Inn wasn't even finished? Well, President Harrison did tour the Western United States. He did come to Riverside, And Frank Miller and his young daughter, President Harrison came, and he had in his carriage, he had his entourage. So President Harrison waved at all the people on the street. Frank Miller and his little girl Alice waved back at President Harrison. So President Harrison got his picture on my wall, even though the building was not complete. President McKinley, when he was assassinated, who became president, Theodore Roosevelt, finishing that term, and he did stay here. On the other side is Herbert Walker Bush, the first President Bush, did not stay here, but the story is that it was intending that he stay here, but because of health or commitments, he didn't stay here. But the painting had been completed, so in honor of the president, they did put his picture on the wall. President Taft did visit. President Taft was a very robust gentleman, well over 6 feet, about 350 pounds. So he was visiting Riverside, and Frank Miller wanted to honor him. So he had a huge, wonderful chair that we're going to walk by, built for President Taft in honor of President Taft visiting his Mission Inn. President Taft saw the chair and saw how large it was. He was insulted, absolutely insulted. No way am I that large. I'm your president. How dare you? So President Taft refused to have his picture taken in the chair. He did sit in it the night of the banquet, but after that wanted no part of it. And when he went back to Washington in the White House, he left the chair and we got to keep the chair. When I'm giving tours to elementary school kids, I can get about 4 fourth graders across the seat of that chair. That is a great picture taking opportunity too when you come back in. So that is the Taft chair, and we'll point that out. President Hoover was here, obviously promoting the Hoover Dam. Next to him, President Kennedy. President Kennedy was not here as a president. In 1939, he was a graduate student at Stanford University. He was here representing his father at the World Peace Conferences. Joseph Kennedy was the ambassador to Great Britain. So he was here in 1939 as a graduate student, but he also came back in 1959, the year before he announced his candidacy for U.S. president. So really, he was never a president, but he does get his picture on my wall, my token Democrat. On the other side of him, Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was here. He campaigned for Mary Bono, Sonny Bono's wife from the Coachella Valley. Next to him, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan and his second wife, Nancy, had their honeymoon here. And I'll try and point out the Alhambra suite where they had their honeymoon. George Bush did stay here. He stayed in the International Rotunda. That's the suite with only the 10 guest rooms. They had to close down that entire wing of the hotel. You have a sitting U.S. president, Secret Service, all over the place. I'm sure it didn't make the businesses very, very happy about being completely closed down. On the other side of the arch, Richard Milhouse Nixon. Richard Milhouse Nixon is not on the other side of the arch because he was a bad boy and Watergate happened. He actually, of all of our presidents, had the strongest tie to the Mission Inn. He was from the San Gabriel Valley, went to Whittier Law School. He had a favorite aunt that lived here in Riverside, so he spent time here in Riverside. And of course, the Western White House was in San Clemente. So there is a plaque. The reason he's on that side of the arch is there is a plaque underneath his picture which memorializes that he and his wife, Patricia Ryan, got married here at the Mission Inn. He was a young attorney, she was a young school teacher. They had no money, and they wanted to get married in our chapel, couldn't afford the $35 to get married in the Mission Inn Chapel, so they got married in front of the fireplace here in the Presidential Lounge. And you can go and see there's a plaque commemorating that. So yes, so those are our presidents. We're going to now go into the Grand Parisian Ballroom. The Grand Parisian Ballroom is the largest meeting room in the hotel. It was designed, remember, to house the World Peace Conferences. It was also designed to be the largest meeting area in the hotel, and it was the music room when it was first built. It's now called the Grand Parisian Ballroom. When we're going down, please spot yourself on those railings. The stairs are a titch steep. Sometimes we'll have 3 weddings a day here at the Mission Inn. This room is perfect for receptions. It's also used for quinceañeras, graduations, commencement, but it does make for an incredibly gorgeous reception venue. So when it was built in 1910, it was finished in 1910, but when it was being designed, Frank's wife, Belle, was a music aficionado, loved music of all kinds. So he wanted to build a room that she could entertain and have the guests here. You have a gallery for the musicians right here along this wall. But he also installed a Kimball organ. That is an original Kimmel organ. It's been refurbished probably 3 times. The last time was about 2003. 2,600 pipes. Most of those pipes are beneath the ground floor, and if you the acoustics in this room are really incredible. So when they would get up that organ, the hair on the back of your neck would stand up, and I have heard it. It was incredibly gorgeous. So this was the music room. The intention of the music room is for gatherings in late afternoon and evenings and entertainment for him. Do
they still come in and play?
They do every spring. Every spring, the Friends of the Mission Inn, whose goal in life is to raise money to refurbish furniture and art here at the Mission Inn, they do a fundraiser, and they have a silent movie. They have an organist from UC Riverside come in, and they play the background, the theme music to this silent music. The last one was Rudolph Valentino. It was called Wind and Blood or Wind and Storm. Anyway, it was pretty neat because the music is really incredible in here. It's a gorgeous, and it's beautifully tuned. So this is in the Cloister wing. The reason it's called the Cloister wing is it runs the length of Orange Street, but you see these arches right here on my left. Those arches were open when the room was complete, and they looked down into a cloister, which is beneath street level. So it's beneath street level. It was very cool. And Frank, like I said, collected all over. He had so much artwork and furniture, he didn't oftentimes have a place to store it. So he opened up this Cloister art walk to display artwork and furniture. You could go down there, you could walk around and see all the artwork, or you could stand in these open arches and look down into the artwork. Well, it is beneath street level, it is subterranean, and our Santa Ana River at that time was a free-flowing before flood control blocked it up. So the river did overflow its banks, it did flood downtown Riverside, and it flooded the Cloister. It flooded the art walk, and many pieces of artwork and furniture were either destroyed or badly damaged. Some will be able to be restored. So that was the Cloister walk. So when the inn was completely redone, starting in 1985, they closed that off. There's only one entrance and one exit there, and I think now, today, the current administration just uses it for storage, but you can no longer go down as a guest. And when I first started my docent training, we were allowed, that could be a part of not a part of guest tours, but they took us down there to help us understand the history of the Mission Inn. And it was kind of spooky. This is poured concrete, so very cool. So I can understand why in our hot summers in Riverside, the guests like being down there. Some people, the urban myth, some people will call it the catacombs. There's no dead bodies down there. Nobody is buried down there. It is the Cloister art walk. So if you hear people refer to the Cloister art walk, that's where it is. So the other thing about Frank, like I said, Frank loved to collect things, and there were 2 gold rushes in California. The first one was the 49ers. That was the metal gold. The second one was the orange industry. That was the most famous and that brought in millions and millions of dollars into the state coffers. So when the gold rush started, people would come from all around the world and across country. They would come around the tip of South America, up the coast, and drop anchor in San Francisco Bay. When the Panama Canal opened, they had to dredge San Francisco Bay to make room for the very large ships that were coming through the slips in Panama Canal. So when the gold rush, they came in wooden ships, and they would come drop anchor in San Francisco Bay, and they were so intoxicated by the gold rush is they would simply abandon the ships in San Francisco Harbor. That was not only the guests, but the crew. So they would just go off to Sutter to get rich, and these ships would be sitting left in San Francisco Bay. What does wood do when sitting in water for a long time? But it rots and it sinks. When they opened the Panama Canal and had to dredge San Francisco Bay, what did they pull up? They pulled up these old ghost ships. What were attached to these old ghost ships but ship's chains? So if you look at my gorgeous French chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, they are being supported and hung by ship's chains. Junk metal. Frank on one of his shopping trips bought all these miles and miles of ship's chains, and he used them to hang his chandeliers here in this room. You also see ship's chains if you get up to go to Mount Rubidoux and walk Mount Rubidoux there, and also the exterior of the Mission. There are ship's chains. The man he couldn't walk by a sale. He had to buy something. The funny story about Frank, which is almost kind of tragic, in that when Frank shopped, he just would buy trainloads full of things. His sister ran the inn for him. Her name was Alice. She was the brains behind the operation. He was from 50,000 feet, the visionary, but she was the hands-on. She was the concierge, guest relations, did all the buying and selling for the hotel. So he would come home and he would hand his sister an invoice that said stuff, $800, stuff, $1,500, stuff, $500. So she had to find a place for it, get it displayed, and she had to price it. The tragic thing was he did not do his research on the provenance of so many of his pieces. So we don't know if the pieces were originals or copies or an apprentice of an artist painted or drew that. So she would essentially have to guess to price that. Now, not only was it a nightmare in the early 1900s, because how do you insure something you don't know what the origin is? It was a nightmare then, and it's a nightmare for the current owners now. Because how do you appraise and how do you insure these things if you're not completely sure? Now, the Mission Inn has done a really good job as far as researching these different pieces, but a lot of these pieces are hundreds and hundreds of years old, so we don't even know where to start. So we as docents, we will walk around and we'll have a guest say, now where is that from? And I'll have to say, well, I think, or the rumor is it's from this period and this is the date. Now, some of the pieces we know for sure where they're from and who the artists were. But Frank, he collected, and he didn't put any time into knowing exactly where his pieces were coming from. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of pieces, is that the piano back there? I noticed it's moved out of the lobby.
It was out of the lobby, and that is our Steinway. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and
there's a story there.
There is a story there, and that is really exciting because one of the things I'll point out too is that was the original wing of the hotel before this wing was built. And you notice when you come in the doors off Orange Street, the floor kind of curves down. Well, that was a stage. And that's where people would perform before this wing was added on. So people come in and you go down this kind of slant. But remember, we were 4 different phases of the Mission Inn, and that was the first phase of the Mission Inn. So that really wasn't an entrance at all. It was actually the end of the hotel, where the hotel ended.
But you know where that piano came from?
I know some of the story. Tell us what it was.
It was a traveling choir. A patriotic traveling choir for the Centennial that got on a train in New York City. Steinway donated that piano to them.
For that?
For them to travel across the country singing patriotic songs.
Looky there.
And it has a number, like it's number
there are numbers.
17. And so obviously it's very old and valuable. And so in 1985, when Duane acquired the property, they found it on its side up in one
It was
of the
stored. I
attics.
know it was in storage. Yeah.
It was up on its side in one of the attics, wrapped in like rags, and the legs were off. And they got it out, and they wrote to Steinway, and they said, "Could you tell us the origin of this piano? Because of course nobody knows." Because
he was a horrible
all there
reputation.
was a receipt for $10.
Yeah.
That's all they had.
Look at that.
Piano.
And just as an aside, she trained to be a docent before she moved away,
Yeah.
so she's kind of my added docent here. But I want to keep you on schedule, so let's go ahead and we're going to go into the Ramona Court. I have heard the different stories, and I did know that they knew it was a Steinway because it was number 2. All these stories. I just want to point out, this is the Ramona Court. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but this was the original gift store of the hotel. And when this wing was built, it extended the length that the Grand Parisian Ballroom did. And his sister was in charge of the gift store. So as he was buying all these little things all around the world, she would stock the gift store. So in your room, if you liked your bedside table, you could come down to the gift store and buy it and take it home with you. So that the Glenwood Tavern was added so that it could be a bar that was just dedicated when we have events in the Grand Parisian Ballroom. So it's only open when there are events in the Grand Parisian Ballroom. But it was the original curio shop of the hotel. So we are beneath street level. We're going to go up to the ground floor. We are European flooring here at the Mission Inn, and then we're going to go up to the first floor. And we're going to go up a couple flights of stairs, and we're all good with that. So let's go ahead.
Other places here in the Mission Inn, but this is certainly one of my favorites.
This is in the International Rotunda, the last wing of the hotel that was completed. It was completed in 1932. Frank needed to build the chapel in a certain way because he had a number of different art pieces that he needed to find a home from. The first one is directly behind us, and that is the reredo. That is an altar screen. It is not the altar where the sacraments are held. It is the altar screen that sits behind it. So this is a reredo. It's also called a retablo. I've heard the names mixed, interchanged. Our reredo is 26 feet high. It is 16 feet across. It is hand carved out of Mexican cedar, and it is covered then with multiple layers of gold leaf. The history behind the reredo is we know the provenance of our reredo is about 1740. And the reason we know that is because that is Pope Benedict VIII, who was Pope during the 1740s. So we know that's when it was carved. The reredo belonged to the Sardiento family, who were a Spanish land grant family. They were granted land in Mexico, right around Guanajuato, Mexico. They were very lucky in the land that they were granted was very, very rich in silver. In fact, at one time, about 80% of the silver that was mined in the world came from the Mexican silver mines. So the Sardiento family, whose name was the Marquis de Reyes, they built their property, their church, around their chapel. And they commissioned having this reredo done. So you have the trilogy on the very top. Then you have Joseph holding the Christ child. Next here, you have Saint Joaquin, that is Mary's father. On the other side, you have Saint Anne, Mary's mother. When we got the reredo in the early 1920s, this vitrine was empty. The dual barred cross wasn't in there. That was a later gift from the Bishop of Mexico City. So it was empty. The theory is there was a statue of Mary in that vitrine because of the placement of Joseph and the Christ child, Saint Anne, and Saint Joaquin. So we're thinking when the reredo left the Marquis de Reyes family is that they kept the statue of the Virgin Mary for their own treasures. So the mines did very well for many, many years, but in 1850, silver was discovered in Utah here in the United States. So the United States stopped pulling silver from Mexico. And the Sardiento family fortunes declined. They had to get rid of a lot of their property. One of the pieces of property that they had to get rid of was this incredible reredo behind me. Frank, like I said, always was shopping for beautiful things. He had a colleague who was down in Mexico City. She saw the reredo in a gallery down there. She wrote Frank and said, "Hey buddy, you gotta get your hands on this reredo." He said, "Yes." He said, "I'll send you $2,500 now. When it comes across the U.S. border," because remember who was wreaking havoc, northern Mexico at that time, but Pancho Villa, and trains were being raided. "When it comes across the U.S. border, I will send you another $2,500. So for $5,000, plus about $1,000 shipping and handling, we have a reredo, a priceless reredo. The reredo was taken apart in the gallery in Mexico City, and it was put into 32 crates. They packaged the crates up, they brought them up through northern Mexico into Southern California, and in the crates was these pieces, these 32 pieces. There was no assembly instructions in the crates. The other thing about it is the retablo is held together by pegs, not by screws, not by nails. So Frank's artisans literally had to take the reredo and lay it out on 6th Street and put it together, kind of like a Lego puzzle. So this chapel was not built, this wing was not built at the time. So it was displayed in the Spanish Art Gallery, which is another large gallery here in the hotel, until this room was built. And you can tell that this room was built for this reredo, because look how perfectly the reredo fits in the arch here at the end of the chapel. The other thing Frank had to do is he had some other pieces of priceless artwork that had to be stored in here. To my right, there are 3 stained glass windows. To my left, there are 3 stained glass windows. And if you turn around in your seats in the very back, there's a Rondell Rose window. These windows are Tiffany windows. Louis Comfort Tiffany designed these windows for his church in Madison Square Presbyterian Church in Manhattan. His church was going to be torn down in Manhattan, and it was going to be used for an office building. When the church was being torn down, Louis Comfort Tiffany's family, the Tiffany family, got the windows back and were charged with finding an owner for the windows. Frank Miller's wife died in 1908. Bell died in 1908. He remarried his secretary, Marion Clark, 2 years later. It was the scandal of the century, but they actually were very, very happy. They were traveling, they were in New York, and in those days when important people would be traveling in major cities, the local newspapers would highlight Mr. and Mrs. Frank Miller, the world famous Mission Inn in Riverside, are visiting Riverside. Frank Miller gets a missive from Louis Comfort Tiffany saying, hey, I want to see you. Frank says, we're not revisiting the Bell thing, he's not getting the bell, we're not discussing it. Marion Miller wanted to see Louis Comfort Tiffany's studio. I mean, he was world famous, a patented artist of stained glass. So Mr. Tiffany and Mr. Miller met. We have no idea what the conversation was, nor do we have any idea what dollar amount. But Mr. Miller walked away with 8 original stained glass Tiffany windows. Our windows are not signed because they were religious, in a religious environment. We do have signed Tiffany windows, but our windows are not signed. So we have the medallions in the middle of the windows. Those are biblical stories. Around the medallions are the months of the year, and then around those medallions are the plants that grow during those months of the year. So when Frank designed this room, when he and his architect designed this room, he had to love on the pieces of artwork he needed to find a home for. This room, the chapel itself, is non-denominational. It is a not consecrated chapel, which means that you may not have funerals in here, you may not have baptisms in here. If you get married in a Catholic nuptial mass, you have to get married in the Catholic Church and then come in here for a ceremony. There have been 2 memorial services here. When Frank Miller died in 1935, his memorial service was here, and Mae Spiller, who was one of the original docents, her memorial service was in here. But other than that, it is a wedding chapel. And during different times of the year, we could have 3 weddings in here a day. So the wedding chapel is very, very popular. It is booked months and sometimes years in advance. So the joke among the docents is, if you want to get married in the St. Francis Chapel, you pick your date and then you find a mate. And I have been here at the end when there's 3 ceremonies in a day. It is non-denominational, which meant that anybody can get married here. Frank was very, very inclusive. He wanted everyone to feel welcome here. So to my right, we see a Jewish menorah. A young Jewish family lost a young child. Frank opened the chapel so they could come in here and grieve and have peace and quiet. Over here on my left is a tile from the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i faith is a Middle Eastern faith coming after Islam. So he wanted everyone to feel welcome, so he did everything he can so that when you came through those doors, you felt welcome. So we are going to go out through the back of the chapel because the courtyard we normally walk through has an event in it. We have 2 kind of funky steps. I want you to be very careful going up this step right here and then out through the back. But before we go, any questions? Okay.
What are windows in church for?
You know what, that is an excellent question. I get that question as far as what the artwork and stuff is in here, and I have no idea. I know the Tiffany glasses are considered priceless. Yeah. And I'm thinking probably the Rotunda is also considered priceless. You can't really put a price tag on them. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and go on out. Patty, we're not going to be able to go. We're running into it. Thank you. We're not, and so we wanted to turn it into a high train. We were driving, we were flying. Riverside was no longer a destination place. It was really a place you stayed before you went out to the Coachella Valley or Orange County. So he sold about 1,000 pieces of art and furniture to do a remodel. And he sold those pieces. He put in shag carpeting. He put in acoustic ceilings. He bought modern furniture. Yes. So in that period of time, there's one.
Bueno, esa es la ciudad de Riverside. Nos estamos retirando ya del Hotel Misión. Es muy divertida, muy entretenida. Además de todo el nivel histórico que adquirimos el día de hoy, nos retiramos. Este es el centro de Riverside.